All right, let's jump right into it. When most of us hear the word of federalism, we kind of picture this dusty, static legal doctrine locked away in a giant constitution somewhere. But as we're going to see in today's explainer, Indian federalism is absolutely anything but static. It is this highly dynamic, constantly evolving, and honestly, sometimes incredibly dramatic relationship between the central government in New Delhi and all the various state governments. It's a literal tug-of-war of power, identity, and of course, money. And it's actually fascinating to see how the Supreme Court of India totally nailed this exact sentiment back in the 2022 Mohit Minerals case. They observed that Indian federalism is a dialogue between cooperative and uncooperative federalism, where the federal units are at liberty to use different means of persuasion, ranging from collaboration to contestation. I mean, think about that. To put it simply, the highest court in the land is officially recognizing that arguing, pushing back, and contesting power isn't a bug in the system. It's a built-in, completely natural feature. So how exactly does this messy dialogue work in the real world? Well, here is our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start with the holding together model, then we'll track the 4 phases of federalism, break down the big center versus state disputes, check out the institutions of cooperation, and finally, we'll tackle the regionalism debate. Okay, let's start right at the foundation. Part 1, the holding together model. To really understand India's political DNA, we kind of have to contrast it with the most famous federal system out there, the US. The sheer difference in their origin stories is wild. The United States is what we call a coming together model. Sovereign states voluntarily pooled their power to create a federation. It's often called a melting pot, right? You've got dual citizenship, and the states hold the residuary powers. India, on the flip side, is a holding together model. Picture this. The framers were staring down the monumental, frankly uphill task of integrating over 500 princely states, all under this massive cloud of fear about secession right after partition. So, instead of states pooling power, power was devolved from a very strong center outward, just to keep everyone unified. India is an indestructible union of destructible states, meaning parliament can literally redraw state borders. So it's less of a melting pot and way more of a salad bowl, totally designed to accommodate this incredible massive pluralism. Now, because of this powerful tilt toward the center, constitutional expert wheare famously coined a great term for India: quasi-federal. It's unitary at its core, but it's got these subsidiary federal features. India also runs on asymmetrical federalism. That basically means not all states are treated exactly the same way. Like, think of the special provisions in Article 371 or the 6th Schedule for tribal areas. It's a completely unique, highly customized system. But look, writing the rules on paper is one thing. Living them out over decades is a whole different story. Moving to part 2, the 4 phases of federalism. Let me tell you, this relationship has had some serious mood swings. Think of these eras almost like chapters in a marriage. From 1952 to 1967, under Nehru, it was one-party federalism. The Congress Party was running the show almost everywhere, so any family disputes were just handled internally. It was harmonious, sure, but super centralized. Then, from 1967 to 1989, things got rocky. Enter combative federalism. Non-Congress governments started winning states, and boom, massive friction. That eventually morphed into multi-party federalism from 1989 up to 2014. This was the era of coalition politics, meaning the central government literally depended on regional parties just to survive. This gave states an immense amount of bargaining power. And finally, from 2014 to right now, we are back to dominant party federalism. You've got a strong BJP at the center, but regional parties are still fiercely dominating on their home turf. To really grasp just how intense that combative phase got, we just need to look at Indira Gandhi's tenure. The central government actually used President's Rule, that's Article 356, to dismiss elected state governments a staggering 49 times. I mean, that was a massive, massive blow to federalism. And ironically enough, when the Janata Party came into power in 1977, they did the exact same thing, instantly dismissing 9 Congress-ruled states. It was this crazy tit-for-tat abuse of power that pretty much turned the federal structure upside down. Which brings us perfectly into part 3, center versus state disputes. Where exactly are the modern fault lines today? To make sense of all the chaos, we can drop these disputes into 3 main buckets. First up, legislative disputes under Article 246. We see this whenever states push back on central bills, like the farm laws or the NEET medical exams, basically arguing, hey, you're encroaching on our territory. Second, we have executive disputes. This is stuff like the governor, who is a central appointee, withholding state bills, or intense disagreements over where central border security forces have jurisdiction. And third, the really big one, financial disputes. Who gets what money? These are the massive battles over GST compensation and the complex formulas used by the Finance Commission. Let's actually zoom in on those executive disputes for a second, particularly Article 356, President's Rule. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the chief architect of the Constitution, optimistically hoped this emergency power to dismiss states would just remain a dead letter, a break glass in case of emergency type thing. Unfortunately, it ended up becoming the Constitution's loudest, most vocal letter. It wasn't actually until the landmark S.R. Bomai case in 1994 that the Supreme Court finally stepped in and put strict judicial reviews in place to stop the center from just arbitrarily dismissing state governments. Now, shifting gears to the modern financial battleground, the introduction of the Goods and Services Tax, GST, was an absolutely monumental shift. By passing the GST law, states effectively gave up a huge chunk of their autonomy. We're talking about losing roughly 42% of their own direct tax revenue sources. In exchange for that, they got a veto in the GST Council. But as economic pressures keep rising, what was once hailed as the ultimate triumph of cooperative federalism has kind of turned into a massive theater of financial contestation. So, the multi-million-dollar question is, with all this built-in friction, how does the whole system not just collapse? Well, that brings us to Part 4, Institutions of Cooperation. Let's look at the systemic therapy sessions. The evolution here is super interesting. For decades, India used the Planning Commission. It was a very top-down agency that allocated resources and fostered what they called bargaining federalism. Fast forward to 2015, and this was totally scrapped for Niti Aayog. Now, Niti Aayog doesn't just hand out funds, it's a policy think tank designed around this whole vision of Team India. It aims for not just cooperative, but competitive federalism. They've got initiatives like the Aspirational Districts Program, or they'll literally rank states on things like clean water and sanitation. It actively encourages states to compete against each other to drive development. But beyond just think tanks, the framers knew they had to embed actual, hardwired legal release valves to handle real conflicts. Under Article 131, states can bypass lower courts and take legal rights disputes straight to the Supreme Court, like when Telangana and Andhra divided up their assets. Then you've got Article 262 specifically for river water disputes, creating dedicated tribunals for incredibly complex cases like the Kaveri River. There's the Interstate Council for political boundary disputes, and even consultative tripartite agreements, which is where the center steps in to broker peace between disputing states, like we saw with the Brew-Riang Hanament. They built the pressure cooker, but thankfully, they built the steam valves too. All right, moving to our final section, the regionalism debate. Because we absolutely cannot talk about Indian federalism without talking about the incredibly powerful force of regional identity. Language, culture, the whole pride of being the sons of the soil. It naturally leads to a really provocative question. Is this regionalism a threat to national unity? Think about it. When a state proudly asserts its linguistic or cultural identity over its national one, should New Delhi be hitting the panic button? Well, our sources present two very different, fascinating academic lenses on this. First, you have Garharpal Singh, who offers the core versus periphery model. He argues that regional demands from inland core states, like Chhattisgarh, aren't really a big deal. But regional movements popping up from periphery, border states, like Jammu and Kashmir, Punjab, or the Northeast, those require extremely careful handling because of the obvious security dimensions. On the flip side, Dr. Prerna Singh flips the script entirely. She argues regionalism is actually good for development. Her research shows that southern states have achieved way better welfare outcomes precisely because their strong regional solidarity gives them incredible bargaining power against the center. Meanwhile, states that lack a strong cohesive regional identity have historically lagged behind. So if we follow that logic, the solution isn't to try and crush regionalism, it's to manage it. The Sarkaria Commission strongly recommended that the absolute best way to handle these regional aspirations is by strengthening local self-governments and utilizing the Interstate Council. You don't fight regionalism with centralization, right? You manage it by sharing the steering wheel. Ultimately, as political scientist Atul Kohli so perfectly puts it, more democracy rather than less democracy is needed. Seriously, think about that. Regional movements aren't usually a crisis of the nation falling apart, they are almost always just a crisis of development. People just want to share in power. By devolving power, co-opting states into decision-making, and just embracing that messy, loud dialogue of collaboration and contestation we started with, that is exactly how India holds itself together. So I'll leave you with this to ponder. As India's economy keeps growing and regional disparities shift, do you think tomorrow's federal dialogue is going to look more like a team sport or a tug of war? Keep that in the back of your mind the next time you're watching the news. Thanks for tuning into this explainer, and keep learning.